Opening on Thursday, September 15th at Rebar is the Seattle premiere of the Beebo Brinker Chronicles, one of this year's highly anticipated theater events.
To tell the story of the 1950s, we actually do it as a period piece. This show looks and feels as if the pulp novel covers came to life and they explained how they got into those situations on the covers of the novels.
Lots and lots of eye candy, lots and lots of really fun, wonderful, honest-to-God 50s language that sounds so funny to us now, but they were really talking that way.
The play is, it is based on pulp novels, so it has a heightened sense of reality in a lot of the segments, and there's a very glamorous pin-up aesthetic to it. So the issues that are dealt with in the play are very, very serious and sometimes really intense, but the whole package is a really sort of fantastic.
It's funny until it isn't, and then it's present and poignant, and then it waits for you to catch up, and then it's funny again.
It's fun. It's beautiful. I think the human body as an aesthetic was part of the reason I got into burlesque, which was I always felt like as an actor you were only allowed to tell the story of reality up to a certain point, and once the story had you take your clothes off, it changed your rating, or it changed your credibility, or it changed the value of what you were saying. You were now doing something dirty. Whereas in burlesque, you can tell the story with your clothes on or off, whichever is the most true. So in our play, the moments that are beautiful are the most impactful. They are the most heightened. They're the sexiest. And once you get people into that really sexy perspective, then you can talk.
I am supposed to play the sexy butch, dyke tough, into the male role, and all of these women in lingerie are falling all over me like I'm the sexiest thing there is. It's hard to take.
And it's funny and it's sexy and it's gorgeous, and then you're crying. And you're willing to take the story along the whole path.
Ann Bannon, the author of the books in the 50s, she was pretty much a provincial housewife, but she wrote these lesbian pulp fiction novels, little dime store novels. Men were generally writing them, and so the depth that came from a woman writing them, I think, really spoke to lots and lots of lesbians across the country who didn't really have a role model for a kind of gender in-between ideal, right? And Beebo Brinker became that. She says in the play, well, I'm no man, and I'm sure as hell no woman either. And this is in the 50s, a time when it was really, you were the iconic male figure or the iconic female figure, and those were the only role models to fit yourself into. So someone who may have found themselves somewhere in between on what we now know of as the Kinsey scale might have tried to force themselves into one or the other of those roles, and Beebo finds herself in that situation trying to live in the traditional male skin.
The heightened nature of what the 50s was as an aesthetic and the heightened nature of what it was to play straight in their lives, I think is a really interesting crossover. What originally drew me to the project was that I liked the fact that there's an unreality to a pulp novel cover image. They are not photographs often, they're paintings. The women are just, physically impossible, their proportions. Their clothing is on them in impossible ways. And so there's a real story behind a woman who has an impossibility as her image. And the way that that paralleled people living closeted lives in the 50s, I feel like the pulp stylization is something that doesn't take away from the emotional impact, it actually increases it. Because you see the falseness of how they are living in a style that is not real, it doesn't suit them.
A period piece or a heightened pulp, something like that in the theater that seems so distant but clear, a very clear container, but very other from oneself. It's so much easier to gauge the distance between and really empathize with that and find the truth of the now in it. Easier, I think, than it is when it's so close to the meshy border of your own soul. You're like, I don't know where my story begins and this one ends. I think I can see myself more clearly in something so heightened as this.
And also it does chronicle that time in history, and I think that's a very important thing, a very important story that needs to be told.
It couldn't be more relevant. I'm a lesbian. I've been out for about 24 years to myself. Most of the experiences that most of the women have in this play, I have experienced. And it wasn't the 50s when I was experiencing them.
When we were doing the Pulp Cabaret at ACT Theater, I looked out in the audience and saw ACT's 65-year-old gray-haired subscribers sitting next to 17-year-old gay raver girls. And I can't even imagine another show that both of those people would want to come see.
As we started to get involved in this story, the Beebo Brinker Chronicles, we of course were very curious about Miss Ann Bannon, the woman who wrote the books. We're wondering what she was doing today and what she's thinking about, and whether or not these books still mean something to her. After the first cabaret, when she came to see us, we were a little nervous because we didn't know quite what to think and what she would think of us.
Well, she's 78, and we're producing some very overtly sexual burlesque.
She loved it.
This is not a show that you have to be into the burlesque scene to see, and it's not boring theater.